Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Well, today's episode is a celebration of sorts. As they say, it's a celebration of life of one of our great writers, Mike Duke Venturino. Mike passed away recently after a short bout with heart disease, and we've had several of our loyal fans reach out to us and ask me to invite Roy Huntington on the podcast and talk about Mike. He was a one-of-a-kind, a great gentleman, a great gun writer, and he leaves a huge hole in the FMG family of magazines that we just can't fill. But today I'm going to talk to Roy Huntington about the life of Mike Venturino. Well, good morning, Roy.
Good morning, Brent.
Today we kind of got a somber topic, but between both of us, I think we'll keep it light and on the up and up. We're going to talk about Mike Duke Venturino, who folks probably realize passed away a little while ago. And we have had a number of emails from readers wanting us to talk about Mike. And that didn't really occur to me as a podcast topic, but it suddenly did after I started getting all these emails. So Roy, we're going to talk about Duke Venturino. So I got to say right out of the gate, I never met Mike. Never did. I've been here either 5 or 6 years. I can't remember. And I've had probably over 1,000 conversations with the guy, but it's all been via email. So I will say of our conversations and dealing with all the writers in the industry, I've never had a cross word with him, not even a slightly cross word. He was the ultimate gentleman. Even when I screwed something up and had to move a deadline or just messed something up on my end, he never got upset with me. And I can't say that about everybody. I try to maintain good relations with all of our writers, and for the most part, we're all friends. But I never had any problem with Mike. He was truly, when somebody dies, they always say he's the consummate gentleman. Well, Mike Venturino was. So I definitely wanted to get you involved because you've known Mike a lot longer than I have. And actually you brought him over here. You hijacked him from another magazine. So I'll let you tell the stories.
Actually, it's hard to be down when I think about Duke, because as you say, Duke really honestly was the consummate country gentleman. He was always mild-mannered, always soft-spoken, always had a smile, was always interested in whatever you were doing. I saw him at the SHOT Show talk to legions of readers, and he always stopped. He always had a word for them. He always wanted to hear what they were shooting and about their guns they had. And I think it's not a surprise that he had the following that he had, because what the person you saw in the pages, the words that you read, was Mike. I mean, that's literally how he was. And I know sometimes his writing was pretty plain, and well, that's because Mike was a pretty plain kind of guy.
Yeah.
There was no airs. There was no anything. I know I was with Mike one time, and we were at an NRA show, I think, and the cluster of readers had left us, and when he looked at me and with genuine surprise, he said, "Now, Roy, I just don't understand why they think I'm important."
Yep. And he retained that attitude to the end. And I got to say, we're probably a little different than some magazines. We don't have any superstars. I consider our entire lineup superstars, and they really are. But we both met a lot of gun writers in the industry, and some guys read their own press releases. And of all the guys on the opposite end of the scale, it was Mike Venturino. He really was, in my conversations with him and everything I've heard from guys that knew him. He didn't buy into the famous gun writer mystique at all. In fact, he was pretty amazed that anybody really was all that excited about his writing. But obviously, from the outpouring we've gotten, his writing touched a lot of folks.
Well, I think one of the keys for Duke's success is the fact that, unlike so many writers, especially with the internet today, where they often just barf out whatever they read on the internet, Duke did the work.
Yeah.
I mean, he, when he was interested in Colt single action revolvers, he bought 50 Colt single action revolvers and studied all of them and
Yeah.
reloaded for all of them and targeted all of them, you know, and wrote a book about it. And when he was interested in single shot rifles, he bought original Sharps rifles and original Remingtons and all of those guns and loaded for them and shot them and competed with them and wrote a book about them. you know
Yeah.
and what you read in a Mike Venturino article was Mike's own experience.
Yeah.
And I know in conversations I've had with him, I would say, like, hey Mike, what would happen if this and this and this and you use this powder? And he was so funny. He would say, well, now Roy, I don't really know because I've never done that before, but you know what? I'll go do that and I'll get back to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the next column would be, reloading the 9mm Luger with unique powder,
Yeah.
whatever we were talking about. And there would be this long, detailed description of what went on.
Yeah.
And so Duke really did what he wrote about. And I think it was refreshing. And I think people sensed that,
Yeah.
in the writing.
Well,
So,
he had every shooter's dream in that he had a shooting shack with a window out to the range. So even in the Montana winters, he could still be shooting. And we've published pictures of it in both Guns and American Handgunner Magazine. And yeah, I occasionally hear comments from guys. It's like, wow, what can you imagine having that you just walk out of the house and open the window and go shooting? That's how serious he was about all this.
well, a lot of people may not realize is that when Duke graduated from college, and I think that was 76, I think it was, um, he set out to be a full-time gun writer,
Hmm.
that he had no other career choices. He had a degree in journalism, as I recall, and he set out to be a gun writer. He's the only guy I've ever known that not only set out to do that, but was successful at it. Duke has not had another job. I
Yeah.
mean, ever since 1976, he was 74, I think 75 years old when he died. And so he has never had another job
Huh.
than being a gun writer, as
Yeah.
he says. And so he had a couple of articles published in the 70s. And then I believe he got picked up by the Guns and Ammo, I think it was, or it might have been Shooting Times. They were not together at the time. And about 81, I think, or maybe 82. And then Duke became a staff writer there. And then that's what really launched his career. Everyone knew Mike, and he wrote, different from everybody else. Everyone else was trying whatever was new, whatever was modern, whatever was current. Duke pursued his personal passions, which were, Old West guns and black powder and single shot rifles and lever actions and stuff like that. And I know he told me he used to hate it when they would send him something like a Glock or something. And he would say, he was always surprised. He said, well, they know that I'm just not interested in that stuff. So why not send it to one of these other guys who
Yeah.
love that stuff,
Yep.
Uh, but you had to have the Venturino name on the article. I saw him at the SHOT Show one time, and he was in the Guns and Ammo booth, and they had some drawings of the Bill Jordan and some of these other guys, they're famous gun writers, and it said, "Meet Mike Venturino, 10 to 12 or something like that." And so I stopped by and I said hi, and he uh, he was just almost uncomfortable that they
Yeah.
had this big to do about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I will say this too: I never once saw Duke with a tie on.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did you lure him over to FMG Publications? What was that conversation like?
Well, we developed a friendship and we really got to know each other it was in the late 90s when I met up with him at Thunder Ranch, and Clint was putting on the first pre 1900 class. And so it wasn't cowboy action shooting. This was how to fight with Old West guns. And so we replicated gunfights that actually happened. And Clint, of course, taught us how to run guns like I never thought of before, how to speed load a lever action,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Well, Duke he was so friendly and so interested in all of this. And he said, I've never done anything like this. He said, I've always, you shoot your single action revolvers with one hand, in a dueling stance. And
Yeah.
so he was really interested. And so we got to know each other. And I was on the masthead writing pretty much solely for American Handgunner Guns Magazine and shooting industry at the time. And so I said, well, Duke, why don't you start writing for us? And he said, well, I'm on contract. I can't really do that. And so by that time, I believe Shooting Times and Guns and Ammo were then now the same company. And so Mike was writing for both magazines. And as I got to know him in the early 2000s, he was starting to hate it. And because they had sold, I think, 2 or 3 times by then, and
Yeah.
all the writers were just numbers. They were just talent that they used however they want to. And he hated the fact that they were inserting things in his articles that, he would call me up and say, now, Roy, when you get the latest magazine, read that article. I didn't say that, and
Yeah.
it just really was off-putting. And so by then, in 2001, I was editor of American Handgunner, and I just kept chipping at him. uh, he came to our house in Temecula in about 2003, and Susie and I hosted him while he shot at a long-range sharps
Yeah.
match that it was happening at a nearby range. And so I kept leaning on him, and that's also when he was getting interested in military guns. And so I was showing him some of my military guns, and I said, well, Duke, if you came to work for me, you could write about these military guns as much as you wanted to and stuff like this. He was looking at me, and so he went home, and then it was 2004. I called him up, and he said, Roy, I think it's time.
Oh, excellent.
And yeah, so he had to finish out his contract, but we conspired.
Ah,
And so he sent me articles before his contract expired, and so that we could get him going. And so basically the same month his contract expired, we were publishing articles by Duke
yeah.
in American Handgunner and Guns Magazine. And he just loved it because we let him do what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And he never missed a deadline. He always, it was always good stuff. The readers always followed his interests. As he got into military guns, it was like military guns, and then he would go back to single actions, and then let's talk about sharps. And every once in a while I would challenge him. One time I gave him an article I asked him to write. I said, Duke, I want you to compare a Glock, and I could hear the silence on the phone, with a Colt single action from 1873.
Yeah.
I said, I want you to tell me which gun was the best gun
Hmm.
for the military. And he was funny. He said, well, that's really interesting, Roy. So he wrote this great article, and and he kind of acquiesced that maybe the Glock had a
Yeah.
place, and I think after that he bought Yvonne a 40 caliber Glock. So don't tell anybody. So
That's
yeah.
funny.
So
Well, talk about deadlines. That's one of the last conversations I had with him. Not to get too deep into his personal business, but he was in the hospital, and he had reached out to me and said, I don't think I'm going to make deadline this month. Okay. He said, yeah, I'm in the hospital and it's not looking good. And I'm like, oh my. And I know he's battled with heart issues for a while. So I think on a Thursday, I got this email that said I just can't make the deadline. And then on Friday, I heard that he's probably not going to make any more deadlines. And so he was in the hospital, had probably just received the news that they didn't think he was even going to make it out of the hospital at that point. And he was worried about the deadline. And then the next communication I got from him was, he did something that's pretty cool. And I think most of us wish we would have the opportunity. He reached out to a lot of different folks and thanked them for their friendship and told them what was going on. And the reply to that email was really hard to do. So trying not to get, too deep into it, but that was a cool and gentlemanly gesture that he took the time to reach out to folks one last time.
Well, that was it. A gentleman to the end, as it were. So, I I have to tell you something too about him is that after he was writing for us for a while, 6 months or so, had some articles out there. Uh, he he told me he was getting reader letters, and I was getting them too, saying because a lot of people, most of the people who liked him over at Guns and Ammo Shooting Times, followed him over
Yeah.
to our magazines, which was good. It was good business for us. It was good for Duke, and but it was really interesting. I got letters saying, "Boy, tell Duke we really like his new writing style since he's come over to you, and we really like the fact that he's like a lot friendlier and a lot more relaxed, and
Yeah.
that he should keep up and keep writing like that." And so Duke called me up, and he said, "Now, Roy, I'm getting these letters, and I'm telling him that that's how I always wrote,
Yeah.
but the other guys, the other editors used to change it."
Yep.
you know
Yep.
and it was really interesting, and I have to say, you edited Duke, I edited Duke. Really, it was just a period here,
Yep.
a word there. Every once in a while, Duke was funny. His sentences would be a little archaic. Up the street, the man is coming down.
Yeah.
And I mean, usually I would just leave whatever oddity it
Yeah.
was. That with which one should, or and he used to be really funny like
Yeah.
that. Uh, he used to always say, he would like say, "And so I wondered what was going to happen. And so let me tell you what happened." And then he would tell you what
Yep.
happened, right?
Yep.
But just like he was talking to you.
Yeah.
And I think that was, part of the charm. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I always encourage him to do that kind of stuff. And he was funny whenever I would call him. I tried to call him regularly and just to kind of say, "Hey, how you doing? Here's what's going on. Here's what I'm seeing in the industry." And but at the end of the conversation, when we would wind down with whatever the business was, he would say, "Did I tell you what I found at the last gun show?" And then that would usually be a half hour just gun
Yeah.
talk.
Yep.
And pretty soon we'd be talking about, minutia, because he was one of those rare guys that you could talk to. I mean, he knew more about this stuff than I did, and so it was nice because you could really talk guns
Yeah.
with Duke,
Yep.
you know, and so we did, and a lot of times there was good articles came out of it too, because he would stop and he would say, "Now, that's a good idea. That's a good idea for article."
Yeah.
you know, and he used to do two kinds of articles. He had shooting articles, right? So that means he's reloading or shooting or doing something like that, right? Or else and he called them thinking articles.
Yeah.
And and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, that's where you just sit down at the computer and you think about
Yep.
stuff, and then you can write an article." And I thought that's the perfect thing because that is the truth,
Yeah.
right? You sit down and there are articles where they're doing articles, and then there's articles that are just thinking articles, like your editorials.
Yeah.
And a lot of times my editorials, you just sit down and write an editorial. You don't really go outside and do something
Yeah.
first.
Well,
So
I always considered him one of the rare breed in this industry. I categorize writers in one of two camps, and obviously it's maybe a spectrum, but there's subject matter experts and there's writers. I consider myself more of a writer than a subject matter expert. But when you get somebody like Mike, who is truly a subject matter expert, and I don't think he ever testified, but he would certainly meet the criteria of an expert to testify in court, and he could write. And as an editor, that is such a pleasure because I knew when I was facing a Montana Musing column or one of his features, I'd have him do, like you said, it wasn't even polishing. It was just fixing the little things or maybe rearranging a little thing here or there. But for the most part, it was just more formatting to fit what we do as opposed to actually editing. And that was such a pleasure. And I it's I'm going to hate to have to fill the hole that he leaves in our magazine, because it's a huge one. And it's hard to find subject matter experts in shooting nowadays, and it's really hard to find somebody that knows that much and can also write in an entertaining way.
We're fortunate because virtually all of our writers are that way. You know, I mean, you look at the Will Dabbs and you look at the Dave Andersons and you look at all these guys are not only subject matter experts, but they can tell a
Yeah,
story. They can write. And I know with Duke, I think that's always been his sort of, he doesn't claim any fame, but what made him so popular was the fact that he told a story whenever he wrote an
yeah.
article. And I know I had some readers tell me that this is significant in their life as when Skeeter Skelton
Oh,
died.
wow.
So, I mean, that's big guns right
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
and I would tend to agree. I mean, this is a hole that isn't going to be filled by
yeah.
anybody.
Yep,
There is nobody out there that can fill Duke's shoes, period.
yep.
So I think we're fortunate because we have, I mean, I don't know, what, almost 20 years of history with Duke's articles.
Yeah,
So we will be able to continue to run articles, and reprint articles and do the best of and stuff like that, because Duke stuff was always
yeah,
timeless. And I mean, when you're writing about a cult single action, it's, if you wrote about it 30 years ago or wrote about it yesterday, it's the same information and stuff. But Duke could tell the story. If I'm going to tell readers and listeners is that if you haven't got one of Duke's book, you need to find them. I know the Rifle and Handloader magazine sell them. You can find them on eBay. You can find them on Amazon sometimes. And so, shooting cult single actions, shooting guns of the Old West, shooting single shot rifles, and he did one on shooting military guns, of World War II. I
yeah,
think it was mostly World War II, and if you haven't, you need the whole library,
yeah,
because they're easy to read, they're entertaining, and every chapter is based upon a really extensive series of shooting tests that Duke did.
yeah,
And so he reloads for him. He knows the history. He reaches out. He talks to people all around the world. That was, you called me up one day. He says, I was talking to somebody from Russia yesterday, you know, and he was, getting information about it. I think it was a
yeah.
SKS. And so you should track those books down.
Well, and we are going to be coming out with some books. We just had a meeting yesterday, and they being the boss and some of the folks working in the home office went through the archives, and I, if I remember correctly, he had like 700 and some feature articles and columns for Guns Magazine. Of course, he wrote for American Handgunner, so. You know, some folks may go, "Oh, well, you're just using his name," and that's not true. There's a lot of folks that really like Mike's work, and so we're putting that out there, kind of as collecting that up, putting it out there as a means to kind of keep him going. And we're also going to give some percentage of the profit to his wife Yvonne, which is the right thing to do. We don't have to, but I think that just shows you what kind of company we are, and that was above my level of decision making. So I thought that was pretty cool. They decided to do that, but yeah, we're going to put some of that stuff together. So if you've missed a story or two over the years, and I'm sure everybody has, you'll be able to get those books, and we'll explain where you can get those once we get that all finalized. But another thing I wanted to talk about, and again, not to get too deep into Mike's personal business, because Mike was a very private guy. But I've actually had some readers say, "Hey, can we start a fund to take care of the family?" And I would say, Roy, you work behind the scenes to make sure that his gun collection goes the right places, and he had a lot of guns. I think they're going to be okay. I don't know about their personal situation. I'm not going to speculate, but by the time the guns are taken care of by the right people, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Do you?
Yvonne's pretty private too. I've been talking with her, and so I don't see any emergencies right
Yeah,
now. But I mean, I really like the gesture from those people, and I think if anything comes up later, I don't think we can hesitate to reach
Yeah.
out. You know, I will say this, and I don't think I'm speaking out of tone. Yvonne was surprised when I told her that Duke's guns would basically sort of have a premium attached
Yeah.
because of their affiliation with
Yep.
Duke, and it really surprised
Yeah.
her. As it would surprise Duke, because I when Duke was alive, he would call me and he would say, "Oh, I sold one of those single action, for whatever $1,500." I would go, "Duke, you know that you should have had $5,000 on that
Yeah.
gun because there is somebody out there who would love to have that gun that you own that appeared in magazines that you shot that you wrote
Yeah.
about." And he was just always so surprised by it. It was just
Yep.
hysterical.
Yep.
So I think I reread Skeeter Skelton articles and I reread old Bill Jordan articles and stuff like that, and I do the same thing with Duke's articles because the information is still
Yeah.
there, and so yeah, if I pick up a guns magazine from 2004, 2005, and I read an article by Duke, I I think, oh, you know what? Yeah, I forgot about that, or that's interesting, and
Yep.
it makes you want to read more. And I think what you're saying about the books, the compilation of his articles and columns over the years, I think it'll be really important because there's a lot of people, maybe as you said, they've read this one and that one and that one, but they also missed a lot,
Yeah.
and especially the people who used to just buy magazines on the newsstand. They wouldn't get every issue, and so this would be your chance to have it all in one spot. And trust me, man, if you like Colt single actions, if you like black powder cartridge rifles, if you like military guns and full auto guns, because Duke got into full
Yeah.
autos, and I mean, if you like that kind of stuff, you will not find better reference material.
Yeah.
And so his books, and then when we finally come out with the book compilations, and I'm going to guess, I'll bet you they'll be available digitally, and then they'll be available as a print
Yeah.
book, I'm
Yep.
sure. So I'm looking forward to that. So
Yep. And we're going to do something I don't know that we've ever done since I've been here. We were discussing how do we remember Duke in the magazines, and I'll give a shout out to Tom McHale. We always try to friendly jab each other anytime we're on video, but I really appreciate Tom and everything he does as the editor of American Handgunner. He wrote a great reminiscence of Mike, and he knew Mike a little better than I did, a little longer than I did, but he collected quotes from Randy Moldea, our president, and Roy, and just wrote a really strong piece, kind of talking about what kind of a guy Mike was. So I was also going to do something, and it occurred to me literally at the last minute. The magazine is already in production. I'm going to reprint that. And we had a meeting and we discussed it. So I thought that was a great way to remember Mike. So in the September issue, in the Montana Musings spot, will be a piece from Tom McHale talking about Mike. So look forward to that in the upcoming September issue. And we'll probably, I'm sure we'll pull some stuff out of the archives because Mike's stuff is so timeless and evergreen, and he talks about some of the most classic guns in the shooting world. So, anyway, Roy, I'm glad we got through this without any awkward pauses. And
yeah.
this is the first time I've had to deal with something like this as an editor, and hopefully I won't have to do that anymore. But it's just one of those things when you're the captain of the ship, you have to deal with things like this. But I'm so glad I got to know Mike Venturino and I got to be his editor. That's an honor. And it's great that I appreciate you coming on and talking about him. And I'm sure glad you got him, stole him away from that other unnamed magazine, and he got to work for us. So,
He was sure happy
yeah,
here, I have to
I
say
think
that.
so.
And I think we were always happy to
Yeah,
have him. So
exactly. This was a challenging episode to get through as we celebrate the life of Mike Duke Venturino. He was a great gun writer and an even better person. So thanks to Roy Huntington for coming on and talking about it. Before we go, I would like to ask you, please subscribe. That's how we justify our existence here on the world of YouTube. So if you would hit that like and subscribe button, we sure appreciate it. And we'd also ask you to check out our other great magazines, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com and AmericanCop.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody who works so hard here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.